final part of Darth Vader's full life story. If you haven't seen the first part, I'll make sure to link it down below in the description. Some general reminders before we begin. There will be spoilers on any part of Star Wars, including movies, shows, books, comics, games, and anything that you can think of. This includes all episodes of the recently released Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Also, this episode will be canon only. There is more content in Legends, but I'm not pulling from that for this video. So now, I'll give a brief overview of the items we have before we begin. So we have a Black Series Ahsoka Tano. It's not technically the right one that Vader encounters in Rebels. I do have that one, but this is the only one I have in the box. So, pretend that's Rebels Ahsoka, but it'll work. We have the Vintage Collection Darth Vader, which was, in fact, in the first episode. I thought this was important enough to do once again. We have Return of the Jedi Vintage Collection 3.75-inch Emperor Palpatine, aka the Emperor. We have the Star Wars little logo stick-on thing that I keep saying I'm going to put on some sort of backing so I can properly tap on it, but I keep forgetting. So, next lore video, I'll try, for sure. But for now, it's just this. Episode 5. The Empire Strikes Back. On DVD. We have 2 canon comic books. We have, this is a comic that takes place between episodes 4 and 5. It's actually the second collection in this series. And I picked this one because it has a picture of Dr. Aphra on the cover that we'll talk about a fair bit. Then this is the first issue of another Darth Vader comic, also canon, that takes place between episodes 5 and 6. Then we have our normal printout pictures, mostly for the paper sounds. And I realized that this picture is now redundant of Aphra and Vader because it's the cover of the comic book, but oh well. Set those aside. And then finally we have the Star Wars Black Series Darth Vader helmet. Now I've taken off the top crown piece. That kind of gives like the back because it's so massive that it's just unwieldy for any sort of ASMR purposes. Even this is a little bit big. So, we have it. He's just missing the top. Okay, let's start out with the Star Wars logo. So, we're not going to be doing any real intro this time, since this is a continuation of part 1. But I'll just say that if you want to learn about Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side before he became Vader, or about Obi-Wan's life story, I'll link those 2 videos down in the description, in addition to part 1. And I'll also just say that even though this is a 2-parter lore video, this script for part 2 is officially the longest script that I have written, so Darth Vader just has so much content about him, particularly through comic books, that, you know, a single part is still longer than some of my other lore videos. So anyways, that being said, let's jump back into right where we left off. We talked about that incredible scene where Obi-Wan and Vader have their confrontation on the unnamed barren moon before parting ways in the final episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi. After the duel, and back on Fortress Vader on Mustafar, Vader had a hollow call with Palpatine and says, "You will continue to hunt Kenobi." The Emperor questioned whether Vader's thoughts were clear, and if any attachment to his old master had left Vader weakened. Vader assured Palpatine that Kenobi means nothing to him, and that he serves only the Emperor. Okay, so that was in 10 BBY, and the next content on the timeline we get is 6 years later in 4 BBY, which is Rebels. So I'll take out Ahsoka. And remember, this should be the Rebels Ahsoka, but I don't have that one boxed, so same person. So here we have, like I said, Star Wars Rebels, an animated TV show, which Darth Vader played a part in several times. Of course, in addition to his role as the commander of the Inquisitors. During this time, the rebel movement had begun to take shape and was growing stronger and more bold. Vader fought a Jedi and his Padawan, Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger, as well as the members of Phoenix Squadron, of which they were part, on the planet Lothal. Kanan and Ezra were greatly outmatched by Vader and had to retreat. Vader then dragged them back to the rebel fleet and began unleashing a vicious attack. Ahsoka Tano, his former apprentice, who is now in league with the rebels, probed his mind with the Force, and Ahsoka then realized that Vader was, or should I say used to be, Anakin, and in turn, Vader was aware of Ahsoka's presence. Vader broke off his attack on the rebels to pursue Ahsoka, allowing enough time for the rebels to escape to hyperspace, albeit broken, demoralized, and badly damaged. Later in 3 BBY, Vader dispatched several Inquisitors to hunt Maul, the former apprentice of Sidious, aka the Emperor, when they encountered him on Malachor at the Sith Temple. Ezra Ahsoka and Phoenix Squad were also present as well, lured there by Maul. And Maul was leading Ezra to the Sith superweapon without revealing his true past. Vader arrived when the weapon was activated by Ezra, and Vader was about to go for the killing blow against Ezra when Ahsoka jumped in and saved him. Ahsoka and Vader dueled, and again, same as Obi-Wan, the words they exchanged were very emotional about how Vader destroyed Anakin, and how Ahsoka felt at least partially responsible. At one point in the fight, Vader pushes Ahsoka off the edge, and thinking she is dispatched, he changes his attention back to Ezra. Ahsoka re-emerges with a surprise attack, slashing the corner of his helmet and revealing part of his face. Similar again to earlier with Obi-Wan. Although keep in mind that while this is later in the Star Wars timeline, this episode in Rebels came out years before the Obi-Wan show. So, while the scenes are very similar, it did happen in Rebels first. Anyways, Ahsoka has many of the same emotions as Kenobi when it's confirmed for certain that it is Anakin, and she can look upon his face, and the two continue their duel. Then the Sith weapon begins to overload, and just as Vader is about to strike down Ahsoka, Ezra from the future opens a portal and pulls her through. That plot point of the Rebel storyline is for another day. So basically, Vader assumed that Ahsoka was killed and left the planet. Into BBY, Vader had several dealings with Grand Admiral Thrawn, one of my personal favorite characters. And most of the story happens in the canon book titled Thrawn Treason. I'll do a full video on Thrawn sometime soon, but the two joined forces to investigate a disturbance in the Force on the planet Batu that, as it turns out, was actually caused by the Force-sensitive girls of the Chiss, which is Thrawn's species. They also battled an enemy of the Chiss known as the Grisks, and while Vader mistrusted Thrawn and his loyalty at first, he began to respect him and his TIE Defender program, which Thrawn had hoped would get more funding and attention instead of the ill-fated Death Star program. Again, that's leaving out a ton of details, but we'll jump back into that another time. There is one last comic in the pre-movie era, a series called Vader Dark Visions, and the stories are definitely a bit odd. They're mostly not super consequential, but I'll just mention that in one of them, Vader crash lands on a planet and defeats a massive beast while riding on a horse-like creature. And in another, a nurse becomes infatuated with Vader on the Death Star. And of course, after the whole rigmarole, he ends up killing her. So yeah, they're a bit strange, but like I said, they're not like crazy critical to the story or anything. I'll just mention very quickly, in a comic about Kylo Ren, Vader is mentioned to have led a large army against a species known as the Benethi, and even fought the Zillo Beast, a massive creature that is seen in the Clone Wars. He wasn't able to defeat the Zillo Beast, but the Benethi were subdued. And now we arrive at Rogue One, of course in Zero BBY. Director Krennic, the lead of the Death Star project, goes to visit Vader on Mustafar. Vader presses him to ensure Galen Erso, a traitor who created a fatal flaw in the Death Star, has not compromised the station, and Force chokes him to tell him to not choke on his aspirations over his power struggle with Tarkin. Later, the rebels, including Galen Erso's daughter named Jin, attacked Scarif to get the Death Star plans. The plans were loaded onto a disc aboard a rebel ship in orbit, and Vader boarded it to attempt to get it back. Here we get the famous Darth Vader hallway scene, where the rebels were cut down by Vader as he pushes forward through the ship. A rebel trooper in desperation passes the disc through the opening in a jam door before getting killed. And although Vader uses the Force to open the door, the rebels manage to escape onto the Tantive 4 with seconds to spare. Episode 4, A New Hope, begins directly after the events of Rogue One, and Princess Leia, the daughter of Anakin, is aboard the Tantive 4 with the Death Star plans. Vader intercepts the ship above the planet Tatooine and begins to board. As he is attacking, Leia loads the plans onto a droid named R2-D2, also Anakin's former droid, and sends him and another droid named C-3PO, who Anakin actually happened to create, to the surface, along with a message for none other than Obi-Wan Kenobi. These droids would be found by Luke Skywalker, Anakin's son and the twin brother of Leia, and he would leave the planet to join Obi-Wan and the Rebel cause. Back on board the Tantive 4, Leia is captured and brought to the Death Star, where Vader and Grand Moff Tarkin force her to reveal that the rebels are on Tatooine by threatening the destruction of her own planet of Alderaan. Unknown to Vader and Tarkin at the time, Tatooine was a lie, but regardless, they still used the Death Star to destroy Alderaan anyways. The Millennium Falcon, with Luke and Obi-Wan aboard, arrived to where Alderaan used to be after the planet was destroyed, in search of Leia, and they were pulled into the Death Star by the tractor beam. On board the Death Star, Kenobi and Vader sense each other, and after Kenobi disables the tractor beam, they begin their final duel. Now, looking back, before the new show, I was afraid the confrontation in Obi-Wan Kenobi may invalidate this duel, but personally, I think it actually makes a lot more sense now. Kenobi isn't emotional or devastated seeing his apprentice like this. He's now accepted has become, which makes a lot more sense since he's now seen him 10 years prior. At the end of the fight, Obi-Wan raises his lightsaber and allows Vader to strike him down, transforming into the Force. Luke and Leia, now freed from her prison cell, escape from the Death Star. However, Vader was able to successfully use their escape to track them to the real Rebel base on Yavin 4. Luke and the other rebels and their fighters took off, armed with the knowledge of the Death Star's flaw due to the plans acquired from Scarif. Vader eliminated several rebels and his die advanced, leaving only Luke alive. Vader is hot on Luke's trail in the trench run of the Death Star. However, the Millennium Falcon attacks, destroying a TIE fighter and sending Vader spiraling off into space. Luke is then able to destroy the Death Star with a well-placed shot. And after the battle, Vader sends out a distress signal, and a Star Destroyer arrives to pick him up. After episode 4, there's actually a ton of additional content through the canon comics. Again, I'm trying to go with only the major plot points here so we don't take forever. But the basic idea of the period between episode 4 and 5 is Darth Vader looking for the Jedi that he encountered in the Death Star battle. His first encounter with Luke was actually by chance, and they didn't interact much. Luke had entered a pod race to win money for the rebels, and Vader, also at the event, watching, happened to notice a human doing well. He used the Force to cause Luke's engines to malfunction, and Luke fled. Several weeks later, Vader visited the weapons factory on Moon 1 to meet with an envoy and ensure raw materials could go through uncontrolled space. Well, as it turns out, the Prime Rebel gang was the envoy. Han Solo, Chewbacca, Luke, and Leia. Eventually, Vader and Luke dueled, although Vader still did not know his identity at this time. Vader grabbed Luke's lightsaber and realized that it was actually his own, or should I say Anakin's, from the Clone Wars. But before he could question it, the two were separated by a rebel commandeered AT-AT. Vader brought the AT-AT down, but was hit and damaged badly, and Luke and the rebels began to flee. Luke destroyed the power core of the factory, causing it to explode, before escaping aboard the Millennium Falcon. And Vader vowed to find out who he was and to turn him to the dark side. Back on Coruscant, Palpatine was extremely displeased with both the destruction of the Death Star and now the weapons factory, and decided to put Vader under the command of Grand General Tag. Vader decided to make no mention of Kenobi, his disappearance, or the new Force-sensitive apprentice. Also, a new unknown man came to meet with the Emperor, and Vader inquired who he was, but the Emperor would not say. Vader was then instructed to go to Tatooine to finish the Moon negotiations. On Tatooine, Jabba and his people attacked Vader, but after Vader killed them all and force-choked Jabba, Jabba changed his attitude. Jabba then sent two of his best bounty hunters to work with Vader, Boba Fett and Black Chrysanthemum, who was a Wookiee. Vader then slaughtered a group of sand people before meeting with the bounty hunters, I guess, for old time's sake, and then instructed Fett to hunt down the Force-sensitive boy and Chrysanthemum to find the Emperor's new mysterious contact. He then returned to Jabba to finish the official Imperial negotiations, personal business now done with. He even joined Jabba on the sail barge that we see in Episode 6. Okay, so now we're moving into the time where Vader was under the command of Tag. I think that's how you say his name. It's Tagge. So maybe it's Taggy, Tag. I don't actually know. Tagge. So he was under the command of Grand General Tag, who was actually greatly opposed to the Death Star, and instead he relied on much less grand tactics that were still nonetheless producing results. Vader tangled with pirates that used droidekas, which most notably led him to Dr. Afra, who was like a human female archaeologist slash kind of adventurer slash engineer type almost. Vader found Afra just as she was being arrested, and when he killed the arrester, she agreed to join him. They went to Geonosis at Afra's suggestion and attacked a Geonosian queen in her hive to commandeer a droid factory. Afra was then able to take control of the factory and began production of battle droids for Vader's private army. Afterwards, Black Chrysanthemum finally arrived with the Emperor's agent, Silo. He was killed during the interrogation, but they were able to find out that he was Silo 4, where his research base was, and that he was commissioned to create replacements for Darth Vader. Vader and his new battle droids attacked the base, and he eventually encountered Silo 5, a new body of the previous Silo 4 that was killed. And he told Vader that he was producing enforcers for the Emperor. The Emperor then revealed himself and wanted an immediate demonstration. Vader fought several of the enforcers, but Palpatine stopped the fight and told them to fight the Empire's enemies instead. Palpatine had thought, after Mustafar and everything that had happened, he would need the enforcers to replace Vader, but he was now impressed with Vader and his independence, including the droid army. Vader returned to the ship, and Fett was ready to report on his mission. He was not able to capture the boy, but had his name, Skywalker, and Vader found out that Luke was his son. He decided not to tell Palpatine and vowed to have his son join him. He went with Afra to Tatooine and visited the Lars homestead where Luke used to live and found it abandoned, then went to Kenobi's hut. Vader could sense Luke's battle with Fett, but got nothing else, and Afra left a purge bomb before the two headed out. Vader then dismissed Afra for the time being. Vader then goes back under the command of Tag, shoot Torrin to keep them in line. But eventually Aphra finds Luke's location on Vrogus Voss. Vader goes to the planet Vrogus Voss, where he does encounter Luke and many rebels. A space battle over the planet ensues, with Vader and his TIE advanced, until Luke decides to ram Vader's ship, causing them to crash to the planet's surface. Vader fights off more rebels on the surface and encounters Leia, his still unknown daughter, but eventually Commander Carbon, a Mon Calamari cyborg. So this guy, who was one of Palpatine's enforcers, arrives to take Vader's victory. So, Mon Calamari cyborg, he's very General Grievous looking. Vader and Carbon begin to duel, and they end up moving into the ruins of a Jedi temple, where Vader is once again encountered by spirits of the past. Aphra then tells Vader that Carbon's forces have captured Luke. Vader deals with Carbon and brings down Luke's shuttle with the Force, and instructs Aphra to capture him. But she is unsuccessful, and Luke escapes in the Falcon. Vader was then instructed to go, along with Silo, back to Shu Torrin, where the locals were rebelling and needed to be dealt with. They attacked on the Citadel on the planet, followed by the Barons, and eventually ended the rebellion, albeit Silo betrayed Vader during the mission, and Vader went to inform the Emperor. Vader met with Sidious in the Kuat shipyards aboard the Executor, Vader's eventual Superstar Destroyer that was still being built, and informed Vader that it was time to dispose of Silo. Also, an Imperial inspector named Thanoth found Aphra, but also uncovered Vader's true identity and his eventual plan to reunite with his son and betray the Emperor. So Vader killed him and recovered Aphra. Vader attacked and eventually confronted Silo, but Silo had a device to disable Vader's cybernetics, which he used to incapacitate him. While incapacitated, Vader once again had visions of his past. Vader first encountered Kenobi, followed by his younger self, whom he dueled and was able to defeat and throw into lava. Finally, he encountered Padme, who pleaded with him to stay with her. However, Vader began force-choking Padme in the vision at the same time that his real body began to move despite his cybernetics being disabled. Silo watched in disbelief as Vader was able to use his lightsaber to impale and kill him. He then destroyed all of Silo's spare bodies and returned to the Emperor, where he found out that Aphra had told Palpatine of all his secret plans, except for Luke Skywalker, and the Emperor was actually surprised and pleased, instead of angry. The Emperor then demoted General Tag and put Vader back in command, and Vader executed Tag. The Emperor also allowed Vader to execute many other high-level Imperial officials whom he felt were incompetent and partially responsible for the Death Star's destruction. Sometime later, Vader fought and subdued a lightsaber-wielding droid that was possessed by the conscience of an ancient Jedi within a kyber crystal. He was able to destroy the droid and bring the crystal to Sidious on Coruscant. Later, Vader, Admiral Ozzel, and General Veers began crafting a scheme to defeat the rebels. Vader approached Queen Trios of Shu-Torun, who agreed to help him with the deception. She infiltrated the rebels and gained their trust, causing some forces to mutiny, and she also installed faulty hyperdrives and fighter bay doors in their ships. Eventually, Vader and Ozzel attacked the rebel fleet at the Mako-Ta space docks, and the rebels were unable to flee due to the disabled hyperdrives, and many ships couldn't deploy to counterattack. Vader also chased down the Falcon. However, Solo was able to flee successfully, and after massive losses, the rest of the rebel fleet retreated and dispersed, leading to a definitive Empire victory. However, Luke still evaded capture. Now, jumping into Episode 5 and 3 ABY, Vader and the Empire have thousands of probe droids dispatched across the galaxy to search for Luke and the rebels. One probe droid spots Echo Base and finds the rebels are on the ice planet Hoth, and Vader heads there. Admiral Ozzel, the commander of the Executor, Vader's Super Star Destroyer, which we discussed earlier, alerted the rebels when he jumped into the planet too close, resulting in Vader executing him for incompetence. Now, with their shields raised, the Imperials had to do a planetary landing. Vader joins in the assault of the base, and while the rebels take heavy losses, Luke and his cohorts manage to escape. Vader marches through the icy halls of Echo Base, just as the Millennium Falcon is taking off. Luke left for Dagobah to continue his training with Yoda. However, the Millennium Falcon was still around due to a damaged hyperdrive and the target of Vader's search in the system. Vader also spoke with the Emperor, and the Emperor told him that Luke Skywalker was, in fact, his son. Vader already knew this, but did not let the Emperor know this fact. The Star Destroyer Avenger was tracking the Falcon, but eventually lost it. However, Vader had already hired a number of elite bounty hunters to search as well, one of which was Boba Fett, who found out about the Falcon's plan of sticking to the bow of the ship and followed them. Fett told Vader of this, and they were able to beat the damaged Falcon to its destination of Cloud City and convince the administrator, Lando Calrissian, to side with the Imperials in exchange for the Empire not interfering with their operations on Cloud City. Vader then springs the trap and captures Han Solo and Leia with the intention of using them as bait for Luke. He also alters the deal and causes Lando to realize he betrayed his previous friends for nothing, and he switched sides to the rebels. Vader tested the carbonite freezing chamber on Han to prepare for Luke, and then handed Han over to Boba Fett. Luke eventually arrived, and the two dueled in the carbonite chamber, and eventually progressed out onto a catwalk under the city. onto the edge of the catwalk. This is where Vader finally reveals to Luke that he is his father and asks him to join him. Luke denies it in disbelief, but Vader tells him to search his feelings. And Luke cries out in anguish and disgust. Vader urges Luke to join him, but Luke, now edging further and further out into the catwalk, drops down below, slides through a maintenance tube, and is eventually rescued by the Millennium Falcon after Lando, Leia, Chewbacca, and C-3PO escaped Cloud City. Okay, so that's how episode 5 ends. So now we're getting into, you guessed it, more comic book stories. Immediately after the movie, Vader heads to Tatooine to visit Luke's old home and to search for answers, where he also reminisces about Padme. He then returned to Coruscant and visited Padme's old apartment, which led him to finding a scout transmitter and tracking down the source as the planet Van Dexa. When he arrives, he encounters Padme. Well, not really, as he soon finds out it was actually Padme's handmaiden, Sabe. So, this is Sabe a bit later, and we'll talk about who this is fairly soon. So, actually, I'll get that out. So that's Sabe. Vader angrily agreed to work with Sabe to find out how Padme died, which led them to Naboo, where Sabe accused Vader himself of murdering her. Vader told her that he did in fact murder her, and then attacked Sabe and the other handmaidens. Vader eventually made it to Padme's tomb and opened it despite Sabe's protests. He then finds a medical implant from the Polis Massa base, where Padme died in episode 3. And the two head there. On Polis Massa, Vader and Sabe watch Padme's last words, and Vader heard Padme say that she believes there may still be good in him, which, as we'll find out soon, is the case. Later, the Emperor, who believes Vader has begun to lose his way and is mourning, attacks Vader, leaving him once again with only one hand and no legs, and dropping off his body on the shores of the lava river on Mustafar with the instruction to rebuild himself. Vader crawls off the bank once again and manages to fashion new limbs from old battle droid parts on Mustafar. And then he encounters a Sith assassin sent by Palpatine named Ochi of Bastoon. So this is Ochi of Bastoon. Vader defeats him at first, but is drawn into a cave and locked inside, where he eventually encounters the Eye of Webbish, the Eye of Webbish Bog, which is this creepy looking creature. He demands to know about his master, so the creature gives him a Sith Wayfinder, which leads him to the planet Exegol, along with Ochi, whom he had captured. On Exegol, Vader finally a huge display of power with a red kyber crystal that burned out Ochi's eyes. Vader agreed to continue to serve the Emperor. Back on Coruscant, Vader was repaired and restored to his previous state. Because, if you remember, he still had those battle droid limbs. Vader, now with the conviction that his son must die after witnessing the Emperor's power, decided he needed to continue to hunt his son, but now with the intention of killing him. This led him to work with a Hutt named Boku, and eventually have a run-in with IG-88, the bounty hunter droid in Episode 5. IG-88 used a remote to slice into Vader's armor and take control, but eventually Vader turned it on IG-88 and forced him to shoot himself. He then used the droid's hand to access a terminal where he found out about Crimson Dawn, and he eventually discovered that Crimson Dawn was planning to auction off Solo, still frozen in carbonite. The auction for Solo, hosted by Crimson Dawn, began on Jakara, where Jabba the Hutt won the auction, but Vader showed up and claimed him anyways. After arguing, Jabba finally agreed to give up Solo, but Lady Kira, who we see in the Solo movie and is now the head of Crimson Dawn, intervenes and begins to duel Vader. Vader can tell she isn't a match for his power since she isn't force sensitive, but recognizes that she is nonetheless very skilled. This is of course because she had been trained by Maul, Palpatine's former apprentice. Luke arrives, distracting Vader, which gives Kira an opportunity to retreat, and Vader doesn't pursue her further because he isn't here for Luke. Now aboard his TIE Advance, he chases Luke, but unfortunately for him, Luke escapes and Palpatine recalls him to deal with the situation with the Hutts who are attacking the Executor. Vader then went to the Hutt Council ship and killed everyone aboard, and upon returning to the Executor, apprehended a bounty hunter named Baylor Valence, who was going after Solo. Vader was then instructed by the Emperor to hunt down and eliminate Crimson Dawn. Vader and Ochi, who at this point had secretly defected to Crimson Dawn, went on various missions to hunt down the Dawn, and also repaired Valence with cybernetic parts to force him to help. Vader then began to uncover that even some of the members of the Empire, including stormtroopers and guards, were part of Crimson Dawn, and even encountered Sabe again, who is also a part of the organization. Vader eventually discovers both of their treachery, so Sabe and Ochi, in joining the Dawn, and punishes them. And then Sabe reveals that she knows that he is Anakin Skywalker. Vader is about to kill her, but decides to spare her when she tells him about her old work smuggling enslaved people off Tatooine to an off-world colony after Anakin's mother's death. And now that colony is being exploited by Crimson Dawn. Vader agrees to join her in taking down the Crimson Dawn cell, and on Tatooine, he even runs into some of his old childhood friends. But that's unfortunately where I'm going to have to leave that story for now. This comic series is still being published and is not yet complete. One last comic before the final movie. Fortress Vader is infiltrated by thieves, and when Vader goes to deal with it, he finds the Knights of Ren, an organization that currently works for Crimson Dawn, and that his grandchild would eventually lead. They steal a device called the Screaming Key, and, along with Kira, flee from Fortress Vader. Back on Coruscant afterwards, Vader and Palpatine discuss Crimson Dawn and Kira, and how her attacks were clearly targeted in an attempt to bring down the Sith. They also deduce that, based on her fighting style and criminal underworld, she must have been trained by Maul. Now again, hopefully, we get, that story finished up. But for now, the comics are still being actively published in this period, so I don't have how the whole Crimson Dawn stuff with Vader and whatnot ends, but maybe eventually. Okay. Now finally, in 4ABY, we kick off the events of Return of the Jedi. The movie starts with Vader arriving at the site of the Death Star 2 build, the larger and even more ill-fated sequel to the original Death Star station, being built in orbit around the moon of Endor. Vader gives a stern warning about the project falling behind and how he intends to put them back on schedule for the Emperor's arrival, saying that the Emperor is not as forgiving as I am. When the Emperor arrived, he was satisfied with the progress, but told Vader that, despite how Vader wants to go out and find his son, he must wait for Luke to come to him. Then he can bring Luke before the Emperor. Vader waits aboard the Executor until eventually, as the Emperor expected, Luke comes to Endor aboard a commandeered Imperial shuttle. After finishing his mission to rescue Han from Jabba the Hutt's palace. Vader, sensing Luke aboard, tells the Imperials to let the shuttle through. He then goes to the Emperor, and just like 10 years prior with Kenobi, the Emperor questions whether Vader's feelings are clear. Vader assures him they are, and so Palpatine sends him down to Endor, suspecting Luke will come to him. After nightfall, Luke surrenders himself to the Imperials and is brought before Vader. Luke tells him that he accepts that Vader was once Anakin Skywalker, his father, and Vader tells him that that name has no meaning any longer for him. Luke is convinced otherwise, that there is still good in him, and Vader says how Luke has become powerful now, but regardless, it is too late for him. Vader instructs the stormtroopers to take Luke to the Emperor, and Luke says that his father is truly dead then. In the Emperor's throne room on the Death Star, Vader and Luke approach Palpatine. Palpatine tells Luke that he will fall to the dark side like his father, and that everything that has happened, including the rebels finding the shield generator, is by his design, and that his friends are walking into a trap. As the battle begins in space, around the Death Star and on Endor below, Palpatine taunts Luke and tries to goad him into leaning into the dark side, while Vader watches on in silence. Luke finally force pulls his lightsaber and swings it at the Emperor, but Vader blocks the strike. Vader and Luke engage in a lightsaber duel, and this time Luke does significantly better than he did in Episode 5. high ground. Probably, because he was taught by Kenobi. And Vader throws his lightsaber to knock down the catwalk that he was on. Luke then hides, but Vader senses that Luke has a twin sister and suggests that if Luke won't join him, then maybe she will. And Luke reveals himself and attacks in passion. They continue to duel, now with Luke on the offensive. And Luke eventually returns the favor and chops off Vader's right hand. Well, it was already a robotic hand, so I guess, not really, but still. The Emperor, clearly pleased with Luke giving in to his hate, encourages Luke to kill Vader and take his place. Luke refuses, saying he is a Jedi, like his father before him. And so Palpatine unleashes a barrage of Force lightning. Vader watches on, clearly conflicted on what he should do, and if his feelings for his son can truly outweigh the dark side. Palpatine goes for the final kill against Luke, and Vader makes his decision in the moment, just as he did 19 years ago when he attacked Mace Windu to save Palpatine. This time though, his decision was to finally destroy Vader and return as Anakin Skywalker, hence Return of the Jedi. As he picks up the Emperor, he's shocked by the Emperor's lightning and throws him over the ledge and down a shaft on the Death Star. Anakin and Luke retreat as the rebels begin to turn the tide of battle, but in the hangar, Anakin is too injured to go on. He asks Luke to remove his helmet so he can see him with his own eyes, and we see the same disfigured face as before, albeit older now and much less sinister. Anakin gets to look upon Luke's face and to tell him that he was right. Luke insists that he must save him, but Anakin tells Luke that he already has saved him before dying. Luke took the body aboard the shuttle and left before the rebels finally destroyed the station. And on Endor, Anakin was cremated on a funeral pyre. Anakin, now having passed into the Force, appeared to Luke as he looked before he fell to the dark side, smiling alongside the Force ghosts of Kenobi and Yoda. Okay guys, I think I'm gonna call the video there. There are some notable events and things that he influenced after his death, but I think leaving the video of his life story at his death and redemption is a better ending point. And this video is already obviously super packed with information. Let me know what you guys thought, and like I said, I'll link some related content in the description down below if you're interested in checking that out. So, the part 1 of this 2-part video series, Obi-Wan's life story, and then Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side. So, go check those out if you're interested in learning more about that lore. And then I have, a bunch of other lore videos on the channel in a playlist, so feel free to check those out if you want more. But anyways, guys, that's it. So, as always, thanks everyone for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed.